first year students yesterday and today around creativity, in terms of not judging your own process and not interrupting your own flow, and just letting it evolve and getting to the idea, as opposed to thinking that you're not creative if you don't wake up and immediately have the idea. And I love what you said, Tim, about limitations, because we're also talking a lot about biomimicry in our program, and how nature uses limitations to sharpen and adapt and create really amazing innovations in resource scarce environments, where humans tend to go the opposite. You know, something is scarce, we go like, oh, like I just a deeper drill, or yeah, we just end
More
up
dynamite.
yeah, you know, we want to boldly go where no one has gone before, instead of saying, how do I live really well here? So I'm very excited to explore how that has shown up in the Sealand story as well. So we're going to hand over to you, Jasper. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you have full control there. Tell us a little bit about Sealand Gear, and then I have prepared some very broad questions, and we'll just see how the evening unfolds. So
Awesome.
over
Cool.
to
Thank you
you.
so much. I think what I'll do is I'm going to give a sort of a brief overview of, you know, where, you know, how Sealand came about. And then I've got a little 5-minute loop of content, which is kind of right from the beginning all the way through to where we are now. And hopefully it will allow me to talk over it. I don't think it's got any sound to it, so I can kind of give context as we go through. So Sealand is, the way I see Sealand is an extension of who I am. And again, when I talk about these things, please don't take it as if there's an ego and arrogance to it. It's just this true journey, authentic journey, and Sealand is this extension of who I am. I grew up in a family with parents who were very creative and entrepreneurial, and we also grew up in a family where there was a huge amount of respect, and it was always so. And we enjoyed the outdoors. We went camping, and the beach was sort of like my second home or my playground. We went hiking. So that's what kind of instilled these initial principles and foundations into me, you know, respect nature, love nature, respect people, and be creative, be entrepreneurial, think outside of the box. My parents, you know, they started a kids clothing label, which became a very successful clothing label. And they started it. My mom was a fashion designer, my dad was an illustrator, and they kind of joined their forces when I was born and said, like, you know, we need to make our child some cool clothes. And it kind of led from the garage of our house to the first shop in Hout Bay. Quite funny that our first shop was in Hout Bay, and then their first major shop, or their first store outside of Hout Bay, was a Green Market Square. Sealand's was in the old biscuit, the old biscuit mall. And then their first proper store was in the V&A waterfront. Our first proper store was in the V&A waterfront. Their financial partner, third partner to their business, happened to become a business mentor to me, and then for a period of time sat on our board until Kway and Cape Union Mart took him on as their CEO, and he had to then leave our board. So there's just these interesting things which are similarities, but ultimately it was, you know, the way these stepping stones of my journey of and me being shaped as a child into a teenager, into young adult, and conversations around the dining room table, which led me to then you know, really enjoy art and design. And then I went after school, I traveled for a year surfing and figuring out what I wanted to do. Then I went and studied industrial design, CPUT, which led me to being and bringing my entrepreneurial skills. While I was there, I started a little business of my own, designing products, selling them at the market, selling them online. That journey then led me to meet the guy who I started the business with, Mike. And, you know, at that point in time, we joined forces, and, you know, Sealand was born in 2015. So we're coming on to 10 years next year, which is a big milestone for us. And I think, you know, one thing which I've really realized, and if I look back on the journey, is things take time. You know, it's almost 10 years now. And yes, Sealand we are making a positive impact, and the perception of our brand is amazing, and our brand is amazing. We're doing fantastic things. but it's been a journey. I often relate to it as a roller coaster ride, where there are these amazing highs, but there are also these very challenging lows. And it's all part of an entrepreneurial journey. And I think our entrepreneurial journey has also been one which is, it certainly hasn't been the easiest in terms of the business proposition which we put forward, the sustainability and doing things in a truly responsible way. I often kind of remove and don't use the word sustainability because it has been misused and greenwashed to so much extent that I rather refer to us as a responsible business. And but running a responsible business is certainly, it's more difficult than just running an irresponsible business, that's for sure. Because you can't cut corners, whether it's cost corners or ethical corners, or ethical corners generally being cut results in cost cutting corners. But for us, it's always about how do we make the best product possible. And it's also it's evolved in terms of what's the best product possible. Initially, it was about making the most local product, sourcing everything locally, producing everything locally, employing everybody locally. But that has huge limitations. And we saw that, you know, especially when we started to export and working on an international field, sitting next to the biggest brands in the world in Selfridges and Mr. Porter and other, you know, highly regarded retail outlets. In order to compete with these guys, you know, there are certain things which you're being held. There are a lot of things which hold you back when you have certain limitations of just doing everything locally. So we've also taken our approach to local as a Pan-Africa, and through some quite big conversations within industry, it is something which we all agreed upon, local industry, to say that actually local is Pan-Africa. So we're working, you know, we're working with Mauritius now as well on production, and we're also looking at more than just you know, producing it in South Africa, looking at, well, what are your sustainability credentials, and what are the you know, what are the materials that are going to have longevity built into them? Where are we being able to produce an item which is more technically advanced? All of those kind of considerations come in, which again is where, you know, Tim, in his role of being a sustainability head or master in what we're doing and bringing in software and tools, can measure, you know, for instance, the difference in the carbon impact of something coming from China via sea all the way to Cape Town versus something which goes on a truck or an airplane from Johannesburg. And everyone would assume that the one from China is worse, but in that comparison of truck or airplane from Joburg to Cape Town is actually more carbon intense than you know, putting something on a ship from China. But there's so many levels to gauging responsibility in these sort of things, from carbon just being one of them. So kind of gone on a bit of a tangent there, but, you know, ultimately one of the most important things in the beginning, throughout the journey, and still today, is our authenticity. And as a sort of a founding member of the business, and what I stand for and what I bring to the business, one of my most important roles today is still authenticity. Because in my view, the moment we lose the authenticity in our brand is the moment we lose our credibility. And for me, the value in what we're building here is the brand value, the brand credibility. And in doing that, the rest is a prerequisite. We've got to build quality product. We've got to talk honestly. We've got to employ correctly. We've got to source correctly. All of those things, if I'm the brand custodian, it's an extension of who I am. I believe that they have to be done like that, which means I have to stay authentic to myself, which keeps our brand honest. And so that, I suppose, also talks to what our mission statement is, which is together we make our planet better. Together being, it's an inclusive thing. You know, it's not just me and it's not just you, it's all of us, and we all have to contribute. It also speaks to we, you know, together we make, and then planet speaks to both social and environmental responsibility, even though the planet is, you know, the earth, but there's all the people and the social component which comes with planet. And together better, you know, together we make our planet better. Better speaks to this continuous drive and need to improve. You know, it's not the best, which means that if you think you're the best, then you're there. Whereas like better, there's a constant need to refine, rework, improve. And that is part of our, you know, our mandate, is to always look at how do we improve, how do we better ourselves, and we'll never be there. And I don't think anybody will ever be there. And the moment you think you are, you're going to get left behind.
I just
Yeah.
want to interject there, because it's something that we speak so often about, even in our course. It's called a diploma in sustainable development, but the term sustainable development in itself is actually problematic and stale. And so to really move to this kind of regenerative space of regenerative design, regenerative farming, regenerative production, to say that we're not trying to just reach something and maintain it, and that's what sustainability is, because it also excludes so much complexity of what's going on and the fact that things are constantly changing. But to move into this space where we're actually making a contribution as a species, and we're not just the thing that everyone else on the planet needs to survive. And I think that's one of the things that we've really lost touch with. We see ourselves as separate from nature, so we just do less harm. But what we really want to say is that we can make things, and in making things, we're actively contributing to the planet, as opposed to just being the user that extracts resources. That does require a lot of intentionality. It's not a simple thing to do. And I think, we can unpack maybe a little bit in terms of the compromises and the things one has to weigh up when you want to do business like that.
Sure. That's why, again, we approach things with an inclusive, open mind, knowing that there's always going to be opportunity to do more, to open our minds further, to include different perspectives and views, and to look at future proof. We use the word future proof quite often in our language and dialect of let's not make decisions for today or for tomorrow. We need to future proof ourselves and the decisions we're making, and it's super important. And also to know that everything takes time. Anything good takes time, but don't have expectations for things to happen overnight, and don't be scared to try and make change, because change is always going to be daunting. Very few people find change easy and so on. So it's important to just realize that all those small little changes and updates you do are all going to make a difference. And if everybody makes small improvements and small changes to their behavior, it results in a big difference. And in our business, we talk about the inches. So it's not about the mile, it's about the inches, because if you're consistent with your inches on a daily basis, you will make your mile. But if you try and approach the mile all in one day, there's a larger chance that you will fail. So it's about the consistency of doing the smaller things on a regular basis. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna share this video and let it loop while we're talking here. And just want to check that that's. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
The surfer.
Jawel.
Okay, let's try and make it. See it play. Okay, so again, this is just going to loop through content, from the beginning, talking lifestyle. A part of our brand has always been about creating this aspirational. It's an aspirational brand with an educational voice, and we try to portray that in the content that we do, and we don't want people to take us too seriously, but we also don't want to. We're not joking about, and that's it's like aspirational but educational. And aspirational we can have some fun with and create cool, interesting content, but there's always going to be an educational component of showing how things are sewed. But the video and the sound will be quirky, and maybe the shots will be quirky. For instance, here, this is a quirky element of playing and showing product, and the variety and the difference in all of the products, but it's done in a quirky way of how one pops out of another one and those kind of things. So always trying to incorporate creativity in what we do. This speaks to some partnerships. So this is a project with Vans, the shoe company. And again, Vans, they approached us to say, well, we've got all this waste material, advertising banners from campaigns. What can we do with them? They had an event, so we made up tote bags for them. And then what they also had was these old cell phone covers. It was a redundant cell phone cover. How could we do something? So I designed this keychain, which clips onto your keys, and it shows the Sealand outline, but the Vans waffle. And So those are the educational components, but then it's brought together and portrayed in an aspirational way with a skater and a surfer, and the lifestyle of healthiness and outdoors and being active and those kinds of things. And then we have a project once a year which is called Select, which we're busy working on at the moment. And this is really like a really nice way to showcase the uniqueness of our products. It's basically a deconstructed product, which allows the customer, so the tagline of Select is called Designed by You. And we cut lots of different panels. So we'll choose a particular product. So this year is our most popular little crossbody accessory. And you choose all the panels yourself as a customer in store. And then there's a few day turnaround time, and then you get this bag made up for you. But it allows like self-expression. It allows to showcase individuality. It brings creativity to people who may not consider themselves creative. And it really shows people, when they see the deconstructed waste material, it shows the importance of that. This video was a campaign we ran around a new material called Economies, which is regenerative nylon, which this company sort of rescues old fishing nets, which is one of the material inputs, nylon inputs, which goes into this particular range of this fabric. So it goes through a rescue and then a regenerative process, and then we developed this fabric with them, which we've then applied to our bags. So there's always in generally all the content we do, there's going to be this, the part of showing this the behind the scenes story, but then the application in the life in the world of a Sealander. And we've started to introduce a little bit more of like call it a shock factor of, what it could have been versus what it is. Then as our brand has grown, we've also, evolved from making completely one-off pieces to pieces which are more refined from scalability. So that last range was talking to that. And then this is one of our newest collections, which is called the Commuter. And really it's talking to sort of like an urban commuter, looking at bags to compete in the markets against brands like Thule and Patagonia. So it's got the sustainability credentials of Patagonia, but it talks to features and functionality of Thule. And then this is our latest collaboration with a really cool guy from Joburg called Maps Mapanyani, and it's a collab between Sealand and Maps. And we played on his name, which is Maps, M-A-P-S, but also Maps and Travel and Journey. And that created the inspiration into the logo lockups and how we produced the artwork for the range. So, and that speaks to so much of what we do. There's so much consideration in what we do in the tech. Like, it may portray itself as simple in the finished product, but the amount of consideration and thought processes that have gone into producing the product, and why we chose that stitch to be the zigzag and the thread, and why we, everything has got an answer to it. Then we created icons from different landmarks, which are important, and built those into the design as well. Then we shot the content in, these places in different places in Johannesburg, from the Soweto Towers to his home, which he grew up in, to a few different locations there. So yeah, that's kind of just a little bit of an overview. I'll stop sharing now. Yeah, so that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of like where we started, where every single product was completely unique inside and outside, and how that's evolved to something which is a little bit more scalable. We're not a business where we can go and scale and make millions of items, but still keeping the authenticity to the upcycled, unique. Every single bag's interior is completely unique, using upcycled advertising banners. And then what we're starting to do more of now is using recycled and regenerative nylons on the outside. And then we're also now looking at all of our hardware and looking at how we can source recycled versions of zips and labels. But importantly is you've got to look at not only the low-hanging fruit, but what are the items that are going to make the biggest impact. So there's no point in going and focusing all this energy up front on like getting the label to be a recycled fabric if, you know, the lion's share of your fabric input is not. So rather focus on the high impact areas first and do it in that kind of regard.
Awesome. I have a couple of questions around this idea of waste to value, because I personally think that there's a lot of scope there for entrepreneurial ventures, because we just generate so much waste.
Yeah.
And so I'm very excited about anything that is more of a closed loop design, and this idea that waste from one industry might be, you know, input or a starting resource for something else. So how do you go about finding those opportunities and making those connections between industries?
It's become a lot more sort of like, not structured, but a lot more strategic now. Whereas, you know, for me, the first time this all happened was before Sealand. I was making furniture and products in my business before Sealand even was considered. And I had all these offcuts from my furniture, which I was boarding. And then I just one day happened to make, I've got one right here, these little characters. And these little dudes over here was like some driftwood for an arm and a skew nail, and then like a offcut of like a piece of a furniture leg, and then I drilled some holes. And these characters became something which I called robots. And my robots very quickly started to outshine all of my furniture items. And it just showed me like this is something which material input cost was zero, perceived by everybody else is complete rubbish, which needs to be thrown away and discarded. Yet I was like, okay, creatively, I'm going to construct something. And then I sold them for like a premium price point. And it really just showed me this, that there's value in waste if you just look at it in a different way. And that's then this idea of how Sealand came about. And now that I talk about it is in a more structured environment is, you know, well, we need to have waste partnerships, because pre-COVID we had, you know, an informal agreement with a company called Scan Displays, which did all the CTR, all the convention center display stands. And every week there was a new batch of waste fabric, which we were using for the inputting of our bags for the lining, which, you know, it's amazing. We weren't paying anything for it. We were doing them a service by collecting and taking it off their hands. And so therefore we're being responsible with their disposal of it and supporting a local business. We were happy because we were getting material for free. And the cost wasn't in the material, it was in the processing of the material. But then COVID came and there were no more conferences, and then that waste stream dried up, and that made us, it was very difficult. It was a huge challenge for us at the time, how to manage and deal with it. But ultimately what it showed us is we need to have more strategic waste partnerships. So now that's what we've gone and built is, you know, identifying, we can't take any waste. We use the word waste because it has a strongness impact to it, as people's perception of waste is dirty, yucky stuff you don't want to have anything to do with. But we're saying, well, look what we're doing with waste. So yeah, we built up these strategic partnerships in order to secure the waste which is relevant to us, because our objective is to take waste and make it into a product which is going to stand the test of time. There's no point in taking waste, making something, and it becoming waste again in a short space of time. And it goes beyond, you know, just that for the lining. You know, we're busy with a project which I probably shouldn't tell you, but I will, is with Vida E Cafe, the coffee group, and we're taking their waste coffee grinds. So once they've made the coffee, they've got the, you know, their byproduct of it, and we're taking that and using it as a natural dye for a product, which then we're making from this natural dyed fabric, selling back to them, and then they selling it on to their customers, a story. So again, it's like we sell at Sealand, we sell a story. It's I don't go to a customer and tell them, you know, here's this bag, this liter, it's about selling the story. And that story is the journey of a coffee bean which was sourced locally to servicing a regular customer, and then something which would have gone to compost or being a waste material is now brought into a new value chain, and, you know, continuing that whole journey as we spoke about, you know, the regenerative or the circularity within things. And yeah.
So shall we rope Tim in and let him help us understand how do we actually measure the impact? Because I like that you've mentioned this idea of positioning yourself as a responsible business, because we know that there are so many maybe unintentional cases of greenwashing where we call something sustainable, but we haven't actually done the monitoring and we haven't quantified and we don't know for sure. So we do these touchy-feely things. And so it's really important for us to be very clear on what it is we are measuring and how we actually determine whether it's making a positive impact. So Tim, being head of sustainability, I assume you're behind the beautiful sustainability reports we see on your website.
Yeah, so that was actually one of the first projects that I hopped into, and it was actually an amazing thing to start with because it gave really good visibility about what we know and what we don't know, what we need to measure, and the various spheres across which we need to measure these things. Because we can look at products by themselves, but that doesn't tell you really the full story. And obviously some of these metrics are quite easy to get. We know exactly how much polytwill we're getting in, which is the upcycled advertising banner. We know, we track per bag composition, recycled and upcycled ingredients by weight versus other things. So those are the very tangible things that are quite easy, okay, I won't say easy, but it's easier to measure than the intangible kind of things, which are like, how are we making a difference, not only with our products, but also with our beneficiaries, within the communities, with our partners. And I think those are like really, really important things too, and not really easy to put a number on. If I take like the partners example, I think, the best thing or really truism that one can say, there's a rising tide lifts all. And every time we enter into a partnership with the business, be it, as a beneficiary or as a supplier, we take a really deep dive into not only their operations, but into the whole supply chain that leads to, a product getting all the way to us. And even just through that, there have been a number of businesses that we've been able to put a little bit of pressure on and say, hey, look, like we'd love to do this. We'd love to do this partnership. We're keen, but we're just not sure if you guys are quite as aligned with the mission as we are. And, would you guys like to start looking at this? Would you start tracking this, doing little audits of all of our suppliers to see who's on board, who's not on board? Like, those are the kind of things where eventually you can get to numbers and you can get to metrics and you can make a nice graph out of it, which was, I spent a long time doing just that. But, it's kind of the intangibles too that you really want to check in on and see, okay, cool, we can say this bag is 97% upcycled. I think there's a police car coming past. But, it's also, does the supply chain that leads to this bag make a positive difference in its, in its entirety? And those are definitely the things that are a little bit trickier to communicate to customers effectively and to even have visibility on and to track. So, it kind of splits into things that are quite easy to put a number on and things that aren't. And I think it's equally important to look at both of those.
And I think it's sustainability is complicated, because there are some things that you are going to have to just do because they're part of the authenticity, they're part of the value system, and you do it because it's the right thing to do, and no one will probably ever know. You can't put that in an advertising campaign really and necessarily convey the importance of it. And I think this is also maybe one of those things in terms of seeing a business as a agency, right? Like, you have agency as a business to decide, are you going to push back? Are you going to partner? Where do you compromise your values? And I can only imagine that, especially, coming as a young business coming through COVID, that's maybe some of the harder decisions to make, to walk away from a sure thing that can bring in money, but it's not values aligned.
But those are the things which are super important, and those are the things which make our customer base, believe in us. Those are the things which keep them, really backing us when they can see that we're partnering consistently with the right people, and that, we also hold ourselves accountable to it. Is we work on a corporate level as well, where with what we call conscious gifting. So corporate companies come to us and say, well, we would like to use Sealand product as a internal stakeholder gifting or external stakeholder gifting. And, you know, our ideal opportunity there is to say, well, what waste do you have? What can we reuse of yours, build it into a product in a local business and sell it back to you, which has been a great part of our business. But you then have companies that come to you and say, well, you know, can we do that? Can you do that for us? But as Tim said, they're completely unaligned to what we say. And we could go and produce it for them and not put our label on it and just say, okay, cool, well, there's an extra R1 million or whatever for that order. And it doesn't have our name on it, and we just produce it because it's good for the cash flow, but it's not good for the conscience, and we don't do that. So that's why we hold ourselves accountable to putting our label onto everything we produce. We don't white label anything, and that forces us to make sure that we continue to stay honest to ourselves. And it's difficult because the cash flow, you know, when you're running a business is everything, and come month end, you don't have enough money in the bank. And you have to pay people. You know, it would help to have some extra money sometimes. Now in the bigger picture, and that's something which we're really honest with ourselves about, which is super important.
I think,
yeah, and because you're also, like you've said, it's about doing right by nature, but it's also about creating equitable employment opportunities. And so you do sit with this responsibility of, and I think the very real reality of, we all need to eat and we need a safe space to go to in the evenings. So it is difficult, and I think it's important to acknowledge that, because it is very easy to talk about sustainability and doing the right thing in these lofty terms, but we need to also kind of prepare ourselves for how hard those choices sometimes are.
I think just maybe to pick on two things that you were saying initially, like, you know, down to the smallest little thing. An awesome example is our thread supplier, who I tried to highlight in the report because they do such ridiculously good work. They've planted 1,000 olive trees to act as a carbon sink. They are almost completely off the grid. They do these crazy things, and, you know, it's just the thread. We don't talk about it. If you measure that, you know, as a percentage of the weight of the entire bag, it's almost nothing. But, you know, it's an ongoing thing, and that's a kind of conscious decision that we've made to partner with someone who is just as good and doing just the right thing. So I think that's awesome. And when you speak about agency too, I think business can be such a powerful force for change. I mean,
Absolutely.
We've got elections coming up in America now, and, you know, whichever way that swings will, without a doubt, influence global climate for the next however many years. If you look at a company like Unilever, where Paul Newman, I think, took over, and he had a tenure of 10 years as a CEO, which is longer than any American president, essentially. And, you know, for a massive business that spans so many countries, continents, and such a vast supply chain, the amount of difference that one business can have by just, you know, kind of changing that core value to pivot towards something a little bit better is absolutely, it's massive. And I feel like, you know, okay, I won't say we're Unilever yet, but we do interact with a lot of, you know, South African businesses, international businesses, and by constantly applying that pressure to say, okay, cool, like, can we get this? Can we get that? Can we get a little bit more visibility over your suppliers? I think it's really, really important. And it's not always easy, you know, particularly in the South African context. It's expensive to get certificates. It's expensive to do, you know, jump through all of these hoops that are essentially designed for a European, an American, or an Eastern context. And so, you know, we do face unique challenges here, but I do think that putting that pressure continually, not in a bad way. I had some guys come back immediately and be like, you know how hard it is to run a business in this environment, and you want this. It's like, whoa, man, like, let's just see, what are your friction points? You know, how can we help you? Can we lend some expertise? Can we build into it somehow? And I think that's the way, you know, the way to bring everyone with you.
Yeah, and that's the true South African way, right? Is to bring alongside and to walk together. And in many ways, you know, I think we started this conversation by saying that the diversity is wonderful, and our challenges are also opportunities for new things and possibilities. And I see that, you know, if we can at least move away from that kind of corporate competitiveness in terms of investing in our partners and our colleagues on the left and the right, we do end up creating such a positive ripple effect. So yeah, that's really amazing to also hear that response, right? It's not just the we're holier than thou, no, we can't do business with you, but then let's say, okay, these are the two things that need to change. Can we tell you how we manage to track that ourselves? Can we share that information, that skill? And that's really encouraging. I think, again, from a regenerative perspective, to say that, we're all on this journey together. It's not about sustainability, is not a perfect thing. We don't ever arrive at it. We're all learning as we go along.
Yeah, I think that's.
Totally. I mean, one of the things we talk about is celebrating imperfections as opposed to celebrating perfections, and that's upcycling. Upcycling is not about perfection. Like perfection, as much as people talk about perfection, like it's one thing I've realized and learned in my journey here is like, don't strive for perfection, because it's you're never going to get there. It's
exactly.
And if you try to wait for something to be perfect to start, then you'll never start. It's just about making a start and going. But again, it's different to celebrating the imperfection. Celebrating the imperfection just speaks to, the beautiful mark in a used sale, or, a blemish or something which one person may see as a defect, but, we will celebrate it and champion that.
Awesome. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time, and I'm also noticing that the chat's been quite busy. So
Sure.
I'm going to jump to the last question that was posted, because it links, Tim, a little bit to what you were talking about, and just what are the specific metrics and the KPIs that you are using to track your sustainability progress? Are there any interesting, innovative technologies or partnerships that Sealand is leveraging to drive sustainability progress? And that question is from Liago. I think I got that right. Thank you so much for that question.
Yeah. So it really, I guess, depends where we're looking. On a product level, it's quite easy to track our inputs, and we can get recycled percentage by weight. We can look at all of our different trims and stuff. An interesting technology that has helped us there is a tool for doing life cycle assessment. So it's essentially a really a spreadsheet or a very, very good calculator. But it's an awesome technology, but there is no silver bullet for being able to say, okay, this is exactly this. The hard work with a tool like that is actually going upstream in the supply chain, because the technology, for it to work well and for it to be accurate, demands that the processes. Is it rapier jet weaving? Is it water jet weaving, like down to very, very granular detail? So again, the tool is only as powerful really as the information that you can feed in. I'm trying to think exactly of all the things that we track for products now, particularly across different ranges. Just looking at the different materials that we bring in, that's always important. When it comes to our beneficiaries, we can see the very tangible results. We donate money. Our main partner is Sentinel Ocean Alliance, and they're always bringing us back awesome data. We get involved with beach cleanups, and you get sometimes down to how many lollipop sticks were picked up on a beach, which obviously is maybe not the most important information, but it makes it very relatable and very personable for people. So that's awesome. Yeah. Across our suppliers, we can track certificates. As I've said, it can be tricky to do that. We can track how far, kilometers each part of each bag has moved. We can also ask sometimes for energy use for, maybe outsourced partners. What's your energy mix? Where's it coming from? What's your percentage solar power? Some of the big manufacturers are really good at doing that. And what I found is, basically, if there's a EU law that says you have to track something, they're tracking it. So, and in a lot of ways that legislation moves ahead of our legislation, but by seeking to comply with that and to track and measure the same things, we get very, very, very good data back. I'm a little bit stupid, just off the cuff though, so highly recommend checking out the report for lots of nice graphs and every metric you can imagine.
Yeah, I was going to say, the report is a place which, again, keeps us honest, makes us accountable. It's not only about sharing the good things and the things we're proud about, it also is where we show our shortfalls, and it also identifies We use it as a tool to reflect on, which identifies, where our focus points in the upcoming years. So it's nice from a sharing, our progress and what we've done, but it also is a tool which we use internally to bring focus to things, because you've done such a deep dive into so many areas of the business.
The one thing we haven't really spoken about, and it's maybe a bit of a step back and going back to the products and the decisions you're making, but you talk about evergreen products, and I think this, again, the fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters, because we have fallen into that trap of fast fashion and making things that last the season. And what is it like, and how do you know, and what does evergreen mean? So how do you know your products are durable, and what is your kind of guarantee that you stand by?
Yeah, so evergreen, I mean, when we started our business, we felt like, it's, at least in the South African context, and we saying we're making a product for waste, but we're charging 2,000 Rand for a duffel bag. The local customer was like, you guys are crazy, smoking your socks. So we then realized what we need to do is, put a guarantee to our product to say, well, it's got a lifetime warranty to it. And that's going to make people realize, okay, well, it's actually an investment versus just, a little weekend splurge on something which is going to be the trend for the next few months and then fall apart or whatever it is. So that was the first thing. And one of the reasons why we did it also, I mean, it just feels right to give something, design a product for repair rather than replace. Again, that's always like part of my mandate, and in designing, and some of the things I took out of design school is I'm not looking to design high trend items that are going to last 6 months and then designed to break and not be replaced, not be repairable. So therefore, part of our warranty offering is, it's got a lifetime warranty on the repairing. And it's fully repairable. There's no charge to having the repair process being done on our products. It has been refined and detailed a little bit further now in terms of, the T's and C's about evergreen. But the objective there is really to prove that we're building, and again, it's not only to give comfort to the customer to make them feel comfortable when investing into our product at that price point, but it also holds us accountable to designing products which are there to last, which means we've got to do due diligence on materials. We've got to do due diligence and proper product testing before we put a product out, because it's going to cost us a lot of money, one, financially, but it's also going to cost the environment a lot if we go and produce a product which starts falling apart and has huge problems attached to it. So we work with institutes now who do material testing for us. We have quite stringent internal product testing criterias. And as we're growing as a business, we're also, doing a lot more work in those areas. If I look back to early days, we may have just, gotten a material, made a product and sold it, and then be like, okay, well, we'll deal with, if there's a problem, then we'll deal with it down the line. But that's again part of that mentality of just making a start, knowing hand and heart you're doing it correctly. But now we're getting to the size where we've got to do more due diligence, and we've got to get certifications and all of those sort of things. You can't just be like, okay, well, I believe that I'm doing the right thing here, because even though it may be the right thing, it doesn't stand up when you have somebody calling you out or questioning you on something. You need to have the proof to back it. So yeah, I don't know, Tim, if you want to add more to that.
I see my co-pilot has his hand up.
Yeah, so the one, just to add a little more context on that, is that, again, holding ourselves accountable to making products last, and the evergreen process is we're about to launch a sort of more pushing more on the circularity of what actually happens at the end of our product life cycle. And not everybody's going to want the same bag forever, and then they're going to go and buy another one, and then does this one just sit at the bottom of their cupboard, or what happens to it? So we're going to be driving a program where it's an incentivized program to bring your product back. We'll then evaluate, repair, and then resell those products, which also brings in a new price point category for a Sealand customer, which is not only from a price point, there's also a whole new culture of people who really just want to buy secondhand and thrifted goods. So we're going to create our own market space within that category, which allows it ticks the box of the person who purely wants to, from a sustainable perspective, only buy secondhand items, but also brings in a price point for somebody who is an aspiring customer who couldn't necessarily afford it. And it also, for us, it expands the longevity of our products, which we will then, before reselling them, will service, repair, and then put them back onto the market.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Sean, I'm handing over to you because I think you have some questions for our speakers.
Yes, I think there's an array of questions coming from students who kind of have industry related. While those in industry, you guys are here, I think they want some answers now, because perhaps Ruenda and I will not be able to give them what is relevant, what is necessary, you being the expert. So, and there are those who are in business who are also asking some kind of business related questions, and perhaps from your expertise you could share. One of the questions here is this about manufacturing reimagined with an attempt to reindustrialization in a small scale SME? So that's from Stembiso now. I don't know if you get the question. Is this about manufacturing reimagined?
Just to speak maybe briefly to manufacturing, there's a very, very interesting uptick now in fabric and textile manufacturing within South Africa that I think was induced by COVID, problems with supply chains, and US regulation on imports from China. So whilst our product is, I guess, an idea and a reimagining of the traditional linear economy, bringing in circular ideas and stuff, at a community or a regional level, there is also a social benefit to having manufacturing. It's very interesting to hear a fellow from TFG speaking about their factory in Caledon and how that had brought about pretty amazing social change in a place where jobs were few and people were kind of struggling. So I think that, there's a way to reimagine manufacturing as in, using different inputs and stuff, but also the processes which historically have been outsourced, and offshored. And, if we want to reimagine manufacturing, one of the best things we can do is bring it home to a place where we need jobs. We need, we can think circulars and materials, but circulars and cash flows too. We don't need to necessarily only buy overseas. We can, bring it here. I don't know if that probably doesn't touch exactly on those, but
yeah, I mean, I think it's great what you said there. And just to add one other level to it, just from a more of like a very practical level of reimagining production or manufacturing, is like the way that we produce products in our journey, and even a lot more so in the initial sort of 5-6 years of the business, is it was so different to traditional manufacturing. You're working with continuously new materials, different weights, different thicknesses, different structural integrities, which means from a machinist perspective, on a manufacturing floor, and a cutter's perspective, it's like you've got to be so creative and so switched on with what you're doing that you can't just run a product down a production line. Like, we were producing one product, one person, they were tweaking and changing the settings on their machines, and like that speaks to like the difficulty in what the products we were producing, and also why not that many people do it, because it's not easy to do. But you had to reimagine that manufacturing process in order to come out with the results of which we had done. So again, a different view or different take on the answer on the question, but I think they all contribute to an interesting result.
Sean, I had an opportunity to just scroll through, and I think there are about three or four questions that come at it from different angles. I guess in essence, we have a lot of young people who are really passionate, who are joining this call, and I think they need some advice from someone who's in the industry, who where do you start? And I think maybe Judas, who is known for asking really difficult questions, has kind of asked the last question, and maybe that's part of the response in terms of where do you start and how do you stay the course. So he's saying that if you do responsible business, at sometimes you will let go of profit in order to stay the course. So do you sometimes regret making these green responsible decisions instead of just business as usual?
No, so I think, there's a magnitude of different questions over there. I don't have any regrets in the decisions we've made so far, because they may have been difficult at the time, but if you look at it in the bigger picture, we are where we are today because we made those decisions then. And that's why you've got to make decisions which are future-proof decisions. And it all depends on what your objective is. The objective of Sealand is not a overnight success. There's no such thing as overnight success in actual fact. It takes a lot, there's many years before that overnight success happens. And so, you know, we're in it for a slow burn. We're looking at making the right decisions to build the strength of a brand versus an overnight wealth or, you know, money. The objective of starting Sealand was not solely about making money. One of the points of doing it absolutely is commercial success or financial success, but it's not the motivating driver of what we're doing. The motivating driver of what we're doing is building great product, being creative, being innovative, working with awesome people, building true partnerships, having fun what you're doing. When the waves are good, then let Tim go surfing up the coast and take his call from J-Bay. And like, you know, it's about having fun and being passionate. So again, it goes back to one of the other, the question which you started off with is, you know, like, how do you start? What do you look for? How do you make successes? You've got to do something that you're passionate about. This is just my view again. I believe you to truly succeed in what you're doing as an entrepreneur, you've got to be passionate. Because being entrepreneurial and running a business is flipping difficult. And that's why the large majority of entrepreneurial startups fail. And failure is not a bad thing, because as long as you're learning from your failures, like everybody fails. The most successful people in the world have failed. It's guaranteed. And we've failed in many things we've done along this journey to Sealand. But if you look at Sealand, you see us as a success, not a failure. Yet we've had many failures along our journey. So the essence of what I'm saying is passion has to be the root of what you're doing, because that's what's going to get you through those moments which are super challenging, where the people who are not passionate about it are going to give up, or they're going to fail one too many times and going to say, I've had enough. Whereas if you've got that underlying fire and passion and belief in what you're doing, you're going to pursue through those times where the other 95% are going to fall away. And you have to understand that it's going to take time. It's going to take hard work. It's going to, you've got to be super persistent in what you're doing. You can't accept no. No doesn't exist in my world. No it's not there. So you'll ask my staff when they ask certain things and they want to tell me no. I'm like, it's not no. We'll figure out. There is a way. Maybe that one angle it's wrong, but we'll figure out a different way. And yeah, I mean, also when you've got a great concept and you're also, you know, those questions about investment, how do you get funding and those kind of things, is initially I thought, you know, that's the most important thing. We need to get funding. We need to get funding, and hard to get funding. And I've heard so many people talk about, oh, they haven't been able to get funding. But if you've got a great concept and you're a good person, ideally a jockey, because that's whoever's going to give you money. If you've got a good idea and you're a great jockey, that you're going to have money coming at you from all different directions, because there's plenty of people who have money, and all those people who have money are there to make more money, and they're going to make that money through other people like the jockeys who've got good ideas and they're driven and hardworking. And so therefore, you know, it's about having a great concept and having good communication skills. Your people skills are super important. And obviously you have to have a good concept, but it's so much more than just, you know, saying that you needing the funds to do it. And obviously you need the funds to it, but there's a lot more challenge than just the funds. But it's just, you got to make a start. Just start. Don't wait.
I think interesting maybe in this case, in like the Sealand case particular, and this is something that I had no visibility of before starting, so that's why I think maybe it's somewhat relevant now, is, you know, a lot of these things, and this just speaks to waste. Industrial waste, by definition, is normally invisible. So, you know, you've probably been into a shop 100, however many times, seen advertising banners, seen all of these things around, and, you know, it kind of just is one of those things that you think, well, I guess someone else deals with that. Someone else, you know, you can walk into any town and just stop for a second, look around. Everything that you see 9 times out of 10 is not going to be there forever, and at some point is going to be moved on. Most of the time people have to pay to do that. Like textile waste, you must pay to put it in the landfill. So if you can take waste off someone's hands, you're kind of doing them a favor, and then they can write a nice little story in their ESG report at the end of the year to say, oh, we've responsibly disposed of all of these things. So like, you know, there's a lot of waste out there that just because, you know, as civilians, we don't have heaps of contact with industry, industrial processes and stuff like that. But, you know, look around, it's all there.
That's a great starting point. I've made a note of that to turn that into an assessment for students. What waste can you find plenty of, and how do you make something useful out of it? I am very conscious of our time. We've already run over for 5 minutes, and there are hopefully waves that need to be served and pizzas that need to be eaten for the rest of the evening. Thank you so much for your time, Jasper, Tim. I know this is hopefully also a start of a long partnership between our program and Sealand Gear, and we look forward to seeing you at our summit at the end of the year. We just so grateful for the work that you do, but also that you're South African and that you're willing to take time out of your evening and just share your stories with us. And I really want to say thank you to all the students, prospective or active students, who have shown up some really great questions in the chat. Thank you for your time, and yeah, just keep on imagining that the world can be better, because if we don't imagine